Hey, good evening. Welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. I wanted to have a quick, if there is such a thing with me, have a quick chat and talk about my adventures with Beth and Beth's adventures learning how to drive. Now, I remember that the last time that we did a lesson, when I got into the truck, I asked that people not expect, be demanding more patience from me. Let me explain, rather than justify whatever I do in teaching Beth, let me tell you where I come from in terms of being taught anything. Now, there's a formula for teaching. There's a formula for, there's a definition for a lesson. And it is that in order for a lesson to be given, there are certain components of that. You have to have a teacher willing to teach, willing and able to teach. You have to have a student who is willing and able to learn. Willing and able to learn. Now, in a lot of things that I've been involved in teaching and being involved in being taught, I've always found that has to be true. Now, when in my life I've had a lot of lessons on an individual basis. You know, when I was 15, I went into the army. I went into a military band and took up the trombone. And on my 16th birthday as a boy soldier, I was in Germany, in Berlin. And my first lessons were, I didn't realize back then as a 15-year-old, I really didn't realize how fortunate I was, but I was given lessons by the principal trombone, I believe, of the Berliner Philharmonic, which was quite a prestigious, and still is, orchestra, and I was given lessons by him. I didn't stay long in Germany, and I was sent to Aberdeen, where I continued to have lessons. Now, a lesson for me has always been calling the teacher sir or mister, and having respect for what is being taught. Now, every pupil starts off thinking that actually they know just as much as the teacher. So you usually get the dynamic has to be established, that one is the teacher and one is the pupil, and if that can't be established, then it usually doesn't work at all. And that's what often happens between man and wife, because for whatever reason, whatever issues they have in the marriage itself, either one will not accept the other one as the teacher. So very often it doesn't always work. Now, it's not just me that thinks this. I remember I actually went at one stage in my stay in Florida, I went to a teacher of the cello, a Chinese lady who was actually very, very strict. She was a little more respectful of me because of my age and the fact that I had been a professional musician, and she wasn't teaching me to read music and all of that. She was teaching me the cello. And in talking later, we were talking about this subject, and she talked and she said that one of her pupils, one of her students, the first time that she came for a lesson, this lady, this Chinese lady, told her that she would never get another lesson if she turned up looking as slovenly. That was her description. That obviously this American girl came and she probably had torn jeans, torn at the knee and patched and all of that, and who knows, a t-shirt and a baseball cap, and the teacher said, "Don't ever come to my lesson looking like this. You will come dressed properly, neatly, tidy, and if you don't, you will be turned away and you will never come back." And I'm probably saying it quite nicely compared to how she said it, because she was angry when she told me about this. She said the girl just looked a mess. How can she come and be so disrespectful of me and the lesson that she is privileged to receive? That was it there. When I had coaching lessons on vocals in London, I went to a man who was quite well known in his sphere. Arnold Rose wrote books on vocal coaching back then. And I went once when I went on my first lesson, and he asked me to sing a song all the way through. And back then, for the life of me, I'd been doing instrumental, which instrumental doesn't have any words. And I said, I don't know any songs. I mean, I was so ill-prepared. It was a disgrace. He was furious with me. Don't you ever come to a lesson and not be prepared. You are wasting my time. In other words, it's not about money. Now, when it comes back down to when I was on trombone, and I went and I told my teacher, who happened to be a man with perfect pitch and a fine trombone player, and the principal trombone player of, I think it was the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and he used to get me free tickets as soon as we straightened out how we were going to behave. And I asked him to teach me a particularly difficult tune. And I said, I gave him the music. This is, I think, if you can teach me to play this, I'll be a great player. And he was very, very reserved, very held back. But he said, listen carefully. If you open your case and you remove the trombone from the case and do not practice what I tell you, you are wasting your time. Now, don't waste mine. And we got that sorted out fairly quickly, and I became a devoted student to that man because he was a great teacher. Well, if you think about the situation with what we're going through right now, how we're being told things and they're not always correct. So we do get into this situation where we don't always believe the information that we're being given. But when it comes to driving, the man who is sitting next, or woman who is sitting next to the student, in fact is placing their life on the line. Unless, of course, there's dual controls, which they brought back in. They brought that in a few years later, didn't they? So it's very important that the student is willing to learn. Now, the first thing that you teach someone, not the first thing, but one of the most important things that you have to teach the person is the stop word. Now, if when everything else is at risk, if they hear the word stop, they should know how to stop. So you teach that. This is how you stop. Now, we've had a lot of advice about how to teach Beth, all being given in very good, with very good intention. But those who give that don't know our situation. For one thing, we are under quarantine. And we're not allowed to go out on the road, and Beth is not ready to go out on the road anyway. But in many ways, the dirt road that we use that we drive to get through the hills, down the mountains where we live, down to the main road, are quite risky. And the word stop has to be taught fairly soon. Now, one of the things that a lot of expats will all agree, and I think it is true, is that Filipinos can be hard-headed, and they will admit this themselves. And it can't be allowed when it comes to driving. As you may have seen in the last video where Beth actually didn't obey the stop word and rammed the truck into the embankment. Now, the important thing about learning any lesson like that is just how important it is to be able to follow instructions. And that's where it brings us back to the formula for a lesson. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. Okay? I've taught many people to drive. Many people who have all gone on and passed their test first time. Many women and men too. And I've taught one man who had taken his test 3 times and just had a block on. He could not do one of the manoeuvres that he was required to do in the UK, and that was reversing around a corner. You have to be able to reverse around a corner without hitting the curb. He couldn't do it. And I helped him to see what the block was on that, till in the end he could reverse very well around any corner. The other case was the woman that I taught that thought that I had no patience, but thought I was too hard on her, even though I told her at the beginning, I'm going to be strict because I want you not to just pass your test, I want you to be a good driver, a safe driver, a good, skillful driver. And I'm going to be demanding that you do that. Now, she thought that I was too demanding. She thought that I was too strict, had no patience. And at one point in one of her lessons, a few lessons in, 2 or 3 lessons in, she stopped the car in the middle of the road and she got out and she walked home. So after that, it was decided, well, perhaps you had better go to a school. And a school will perhaps be better suited for you. And this is what she did. She went to a professional, somebody who did it for a living every day, all day. That's all he did, was he taught people to drive. And she went and she had 3 lessons with this person, and then she came back to me and she said, I want you to teach me to drive, and there won't be any argument this time. Naturally, I was very curious. Why the change? She said, I felt that he was very patient and would have been patient for as long as I wanted to go for lessons and pay him. Whereas you, I felt that you really wanted me to be a good driver. And she came back, and I taught her, and I was strict, and I expected her to be a good driver, and she was. And she went on and she passed her test first time. So it's not for the want of knowing how to do it, but the basic formula has to be there. A teacher willing and able to learn, to teach. A teacher willing and able to teach, and a student willing and able to learn. Willing to learn. If you don't have those two, there's no lesson and nobody learns anything. Thanks for looking in. I hope you understand a little more now that in order for Beth to do something which she is perfectly able to do, she needs to start listening more and taking it more seriously. That's a fact of life. Bye for now.